G'day everybody, my name is Elliot Waters and you're listening to the Dysregulated podcast. As always, thank you for tuning in. Today's episode is all about my first week in my new job. That's right, Elliot has a new job. That is something worth celebrating. Good work, Elliot. You were able to push your fears aside and really go for it, and the payoff has now happened, which is great. And I've used my degree for good. That's pretty good as well, considering a lot of effort went into it. And for a while there, I may have forgotten that the fact that you get a degree is to get a job at the end of it. So anyway, we've moved beyond that, which is good news. Now, I can't go into much detail about the new position. Now, there's a very good reason for this. Well, it's not a good reason, but there is a reason for this, and that's going to make up a big part of today's episode. So stay tuned for that. But I promise, soon enough, I will tell you all about my new position, my role, what I'm getting up to, my new responsibilities, all that sort of stuff. I promise, but I just can't do it yet. So what's today's episode all about? Well, it's about three disorders in particular who have tried to make my week a lot more difficult than it needed to be. Now, obviously, starting a new job, there's going to be some anxieties around that, some apprehension, a bit of nervousness going on. That is, of course, normal. That is normal. But these three disorders, which I'll go through in a minute, really tried to make things harder than they needed to be. They tried to hijack proceedings, but the good news is, for the most part, I was able to repel their attacks. So, what are these three disorders and what did they do to try and tear me down? Well, it's all got to do with these questions that I kept asking myself, or these thoughts I kept having about my predicament. And as you'll see in a minute, most of them have no logical basis to them at all. They're quite ridiculous. If we use some DBT skills and check the facts of the situation, they just don't measure up. But unfortunately, checking the logical basis of some of my thoughts, and even though I come to the conclusions that a lot of these thoughts are ridiculous, that isn't enough to push back against the negative emotions and feelings and sometimes behaviours that come with it, which is a real shame. And that's why CBT doesn't really work with me, because I can get to the point where I understand that my thoughts are a bit stupid and ridiculous. The problem is, the emotionally charged feelings are still there. They're still there, even though I know that there's no basis to them at all. So anyway, what are these three disorders that have made my life so difficult the last couple of days? Well, they've all got to do with anxiety. So the first one is social anxiety disorder. The second one, obsessive compulsive disorder. And to round it all out and really tie it in really nicely is generalized anxiety disorder. So what I'm going to do is go through some of the questions that I've been asking myself and some of the thoughts I've been having to try and illustrate what these disorders have been trying to do and trying to really bring me down and put me in a negative headspace. So let's start with social anxiety. The first question that I was asking myself repeatedly was, do they like me? I don't think they do, because they're not talking to me as much as I would hope. Am I not talking enough? Am I talking too much? Was my joke funny, or did it go over like a lead balloon? They haven't said anything to me in a while. That means they must hate me. Am I wearing the right clothes? Am I looking too businesslike or not enough? I bet the other team members on the video call could tell I was nervous. I think they were underwhelmed with my story and what I get up to outside of work. How embarrassing. They think I'm boring, I can tell. So that's some of the questions relating to social anxiety that I've been sort of posing to myself recently, which has been very annoying because they're all ridiculous. But at the same time, like I said, they're significant. Even though they shouldn't be, they are. So, of course, social anxiety is all about negative appraisals, negative judgments from others towards the self. And unfortunately, that is exactly what those questions are alluding to. It's all about other people looking at me and disapproving. Okay, let's move on to obsessive compulsive disorder. So these are some of the questions that OCD has been putting to me. If I get too excited, then the world will make sure that this all fails. I can't tell anybody about the new job. That's why I haven't mentioned it on the podcast yet, because once I do, it will set in motion the process in which it will all go pear-shaped and I'll be sacked. Obsessions around the fear of the unknown and not being able to tolerate uncertainty has been a big part of it this week, and also thoughts about how I'm going to lose control at any moment and just go crazy and ruin everything I've worked so hard for. That's how OCD has tried to derail things this week. And that one there about I can't tell anybody about the new job because once I do, it will set in motion the process in which it'll all go pear-shaped and I'll be sacked. That's a huge one, and that happens with just about anything positive that happens in my life. So anything positive that happens, I automatically believe that it's just setting me up for failure, and the higher we are and the happier we are, the bigger we're going to fall. And there's always been, I remember this from when I was a little kid, and obviously it still happens today, this idea that if I embrace the positive feelings and emotions and actually believe something good has happened to me, that will ensure it all falls over. And that has been such a repetitive and dysfunctional and very difficult cognition that I've had to deal with for so long. And I'll tell you what, this week it has been constant. As soon as I think, you know what, Elliot, we've done a really good thing here and we're going well, how good's that? That thought will jump in and just make things so hard. And it's so frustrating because it really does stop me from enjoying the things that I should be enjoying. I should be feeling happy about the things that have happened this week. It's all good news when I look at this stuff objectively. But unfortunately, these disorders, in this case, OCD, really just like to get in and just stick that knife in and twist it and make things more difficult than it needs to be. Okay, moving on to the last disorder, which is generalized anxiety disorder. So there's been constant catastrophizing. So one of the thoughts I've been having is that I'm going to crash my new work car. I only got the thing today and already I'm thinking I'm going to crash it. The other thing I'm thinking about the car is it's going to get stolen. I also am catastrophizing about the fact, and obviously it's not a fact, but it feels like it is, that the clients I'll be working with, there's a bit of a hint as to what I'm doing, won't be receptive to me and won't listen to the things that I try and put forward. I'm also thinking and constantly doubting my abilities and being certain my lack of ability will be on display at any moment. Any moment, the charade, the persona, the act, the facade that I'm putting on is going to fall away, and the real me, who is hopeless, will come to the fore. Every time the phone rings, I've been getting that real nervous sinking feeling, even though none of these calls are for me. I've been wound up, restless, constantly shaking my legs because I've got all this nervous energy, and I've been so fatigued at the same time. So I'm just so tired because being in this high arousal, anxious state is very fatiguing. There's been this real general feeling of fear. I'm just scared of everything. You know, if I hear a phone ring, if I hear one of my colleagues talking, not even about me, just driving to work, getting the new car and things that could go pear-shaped with that, there's just this general feeling of fear that I just cannot get rid of. And part of the problem too with the general anxiety is it stopped me from eating, haven't been eating much this week, and my sleep has suffered. So I've been dreaming about work, I've been dreaming about things going wrong, and I've been waking up early as well. So I should be getting up at like 7:30, but I keep waking up at 5:30, 6:30, 6:45, that sort of stuff. And that's because even in our dreams, we are stressed out to the max, which is so annoying. So that's the three disorders and a bit of insight into what this week has been like and what it's like living with mental illness. I really hope this episode has sort of highlighted, you know, some of those cognitions, those feelings and thoughts that and behaviors as well, and other things related that occur during these high stressful times and when these disorders are out and running wild. Because obviously, like I said, anxiety, you know, being nervous, that's all part of the deal of starting a new job for just about everybody. But like I said before, these thoughts, these questions I've been posing to myself, these illogical beliefs, and that's what it's all about, they're illogical beliefs, even though they're a bit silly, some of them, and they don't really stack up, the problem is the emotions that come with them are so strong. And although I've been challenging the logical basis of a lot of these thoughts, which is a very cognitive behavioral therapy sort of approach, unfortunately for people like me that are really complex cases and who have these disorders that are so ingrained into their psyches, which definitely is the case for me, unfortunately, challenging these illogical beliefs isn't quite enough. It goes deeper than that, right to our core content, our beliefs of who we are as a person, our abilities, how we view the self, all that sort of stuff, really deep stuff. Unfortunately, if you're a complex case like me, challenging these falsehoods just is not enough. But as I said, the good news is I've repelled the vast majority of these thoughts, and I've done a pretty good job, I think, this week, considering it's my first week in my new position. And the key really is when all this subjective negativity is going on, you really need to look out into your external environment and look for some objective evidence of how you're going. And the good news is my work colleagues, my boss, etc., the feedback has been nothing but positive, and that has gone a long way into helping push back against these negative thoughts. It's all about getting out of your head and going, you know what, my head's just negative and there's no real sense to it. Forget about that. It's horrendously biased against the self. Let's ignore that, put that on the shelf. Let's have a look at what the objective opinions are of how we're going. That is more realistic and the bias is out of it. Let's have a look at what these other people are saying about my performance and how I've been going. And like I said, it's all been pretty positive, and I've been using that evidence to really push back against these negative thoughts. So there you go. I hope that offers some insights into what it's like living with mental illness. Because as I said, this week was always going to be difficult, but you don't need these stupid, illogical thoughts charging in and just trying to wreak havoc. But like I said, the good thing is I was able to push back for the most part, and here we are on a Friday night as a winner. You're guilty. All right, thank you everybody for listening. I look forward to your company on the next episode of the Dysregulated podcast.